After a brutal stretch on the road, North Carolina, I guess, was able to shake off some questions about their identity and their inconsistency. They took control at home last Wednesday against an outclassed Notre Dame squad, then finished really strongly at JPJ Arena in Charlottesville, which was just an amazing comeback against a number 14 team in UVA. These aren't just wins on paper, they're potential pivots for this squad. Tonight on the Coast to Coast, we'll break down what UNC rediscovered, what still nags, and whether or not this team is truly trending up. Let's get into it. What's happening, y'all? I'm Joey Powell for Inside Carolina, the Coast to Coast podcast, coming right at you. I hope that wherever you're listening to us from, if you're within the sounds of my voice and you are also within the track of this wicked, gross Anna v. Elsa storm that we've got out there, which apparently is called Winter Storm Fern, according to my wife. I hope you're safe. I hope you're warm. I hope you're able to get yourselves all snuggled up and covered up, and that, if you've got to go out and just be really safe. I hate to lose anybody. But Sherrell McMillan there, Sean Moran here. Hey, listen, I've got to make sure that you guys know that we're delivered by Salvio's Pizzeria in Cary. Hey, shout out to Sherrell. He threw a tweet up for Salvio's on Twitter this past week, and I want to thank all of you guys that have been hitting Salvio's up and using the IC20 code. That's right, IC20. You get 20% off any online order at Salvio's Pizza. I don't know they're going to be delivering right now as we record this Sunday night with the roads the way they are in the Triangle area of North Carolina, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you, they've seen stuff like this before. They'll be back as soon as they can get those doors back open at Salvio's and get back out on the road delivering great pie with fresh ingredients to you and yours. Then they'll be doing it. Make sure you check them out at salviospizza.com. We're grateful for them. Fresh ingredients, longtime Tar Heel fans, big supporters of IC and the IC community. Want you guys to support them as well. Fellas, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Looking at last week, you kind of felt like even a bad version of this team would be able to beat Notre Dame just because of a talent discrepancy. As Sherrell likes to highlight, North Carolina was more gifted, the way Roy Williams used to always say. And while they did look decent against Notre Dame, they did have some sloppiness. I heard Tommy and I believe it was Greg in the post game after Notre Dame talking about the fact that there's just some real inattention to detail at the end of that game that I think if you wanted to nitpick, you could. But either way, North Carolina controlled the game. They were dominant. They were incredibly efficient on the offensive end, which happened in California. So we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Even though North Carolina lost those two games, they had been very efficient on the offensive end. And then Saturday happened. North Carolina goes into UVA at a place that historically North Carolina has not had the most success at. They're playing a team in Virginia who hasn't lost at home all year, who has won a lot of really good games, who the metrics love. And North Carolina is absolutely getting skull dragged in the first half, down by 16 at one point, only to come back with a massive second half, taking care of the ball, all kinds of things, and come back and win. We're going to talk about all that, but this week really, really impacts North Carolina's identity, their confidence, and also what's going to happen with the ACC narrative. So, guys, first things first, Sean, do you think the results this week were corrections, or were they more of a reboot for this North Carolina team?
Well, I think from where we were 1 week ago, just from the somber mood and the end of the program, it was definitely a nice turnaround, and I think it could be a reboot. I think there was a lot to like, but it's all going to come down to the consistency and how locked in this team stays. I think there was a lot of things that you saw that you were not seeing on that California road trip from just a teammate standpoint, in terms of clapping for each other on the sidelines, being happy for each other when other people are making baskets. And I think that led to, and at a high level, playing more connected, especially on the defensive defensive end, especially that, and I think it really started in the Notre Dame game, and that started the Notre Dame second half. There were some good habits I think that were shown, and a lot of that continued, especially in that second half against UVA, where it felt like they knew exactly what their game plan was. They knew exactly what their roles were, and they were able to execute. And when they didn't, they were able to just push the ball up the floor, which is not something we've seen in quite some time. So we'll get into it more. I think it was a reboot. Obviously, caution with what this team is, but I think it does show, hey, when everybody on the court is a serious threat to get a basket, these are the things that can happen. Once again, going back to that Kansas second half as well, but we also know the lulls that they can go through. But I think there was a lot to like and some buttons that can be pushed going forward, both offensively and defensively.
Sherrell, I want to ask you what sort of team chemistry or what sort of locker room message does this past week send when you juxtapose it with what they had happen to them out in California?
It's just one of those where you want something good to happen, to make yourself feel good, and it seems like that Notre Dame game came at a perfect time because if the games were reversed, I'm fairly certain they wouldn't have been able to go to UVA and win on Wednesday. So the fact that they were able to play Notre Dame, have a good outcome, kind of have a little fun. I think you've said that a couple times, Joe. You texted me like, man, they look soulless, they look joyless, they're not having fun, nobody's smiling. So the fact that they were able to do that on Wednesday, I think helped them. Now, it helped them in the first half, which is something we can continue to talk about. Like it took, I want to underscore, like it took a miraculous kind of comeback, one of the bigger comebacks in some time for UNC for them to win this game. You give them full credit for doing that. But at the same time, I'm like, why are you down 16 in the first half in a competitive game that you know you need? I mean, it just, to me, I know I go back to that Florida game all the time, but it was the Florida game all over again until Bogovats and Dixon hit those two threes to kind of stem the tide a little bit. But for chemistry purposes, it's huge, because it's one of those, us against the world type deals. Because I doubt anyone outside of that locker room really thought they were going to go up to UVA and win, considering how they've played for most of ACC play. And it's probably some of those people in that huddle who didn't believe they were going to go to UVA and win, considering how they play. So now they have, I know on the football side they always say proof of concept, but they have some of that. They know they can do it. They know they can do it without Vasar playing a significant role. How many times have we talked about? And if I'm going too much, Joy, tell me because I'm like probably answering like 7 questions.
Let him go. He's on a roll.
Yeah, but we always talked about like Vasar, if he sits for more than 5 or 10 minutes, they have no shot. Well, he was kind of, he had one shot in the second half, 2 points, 7 points, and one rebound for the game, and they still had their most efficient offensive performance, adjusted of the season. So I think a lot of that, it was a lesson to them, and all that goes into chemistry. Like, it doesn't have to be Vasar every time. Somebody can
Mhm.
step up. We can come back from down 16. We can win on the road. So it gives a lot of belief in a lot of ways.
It's crazy. We were talking just last week on the show about does the team now feel like what the coaching staff is saying isn't working? Well, and to your point, Sherelle, now with with 2 wins, I think it's back to, especially in the context of which they were able to win against UVA. I do think that buys the coaching staff a little more. Grace is the word I'm looking for, but it buys them a little more runway with showing these guys like, hey, do what we say, and hopefully things will start working. Sean, I loved your point earlier too about the connectivity and how much more focus this team had. Um, let's talk a little bit about Notre Dame, and then we'll get into the UVA game because there's just so many different ways to go with the Virginia analysis, and I think there's plenty to talk about. Sean, about North Carolina's offensive execution against Notre Dame, especially after their recent inconsistency. What was your takeaway from that?
Well, to me, it was really the start of the second half where, once again, the first half, they played well at times, gave up runs. It felt like a game that, hey, this should be a 20-point game at the end, but it's still within that 9 to 10 point market at halftime that could go either way. And they came out really to start that second half, Vasar with a 2 hitting threes, and really they put it away in that first 5 minutes. And in that first 10 minutes, they scored 30 points. So they came to play offensively. They were hitting shots. They were locked in. Once again, they had a lot of different players hitting those shots, and you saw that joy come in terms of, I think it was Caleb from a post hockey assist, and he is the most excited guy on the court. So I think that part of the second half was almost a precursor to the UVA second half, where once again they had close to 30 in that first 10 minutes, but it was really those first few minutes coming out of the half where this time they had to use it to get right back in the game. But they, within 4 minutes, now it's a 2-possession game, and they didn't let it the air come out of them. They were able to keep it within that realm and push forward pretty quickly. But I do think from Notre Dame, that offensive output that they did have to put them on their heels, lock it up quickly, but also one thing, especially for UVA, which we can talk about a little bit more, off-ball movement and focus on 3 to 4 other players moving without the ball. I think a lot of that started even defensively in terms of just more communication, started from that Notre Dame game, and to me especially that first 5 to 10 minutes of the second half.
So what is it, Sherrell, about this team and really slow starts and then great starts out of half? I think the easy thing would be that, Hubert Davis goes in there and peels the paint off the walls and really challenges guys' manhood or what have you. That's not who he is. But clearly, as we were searching last week to try to figure out, what is the identity of this team, if nothing else, the Hubert Davis team seems to be a team that starts out slow, but seems to find a blitz early in the second half right out of the locker room. Help me understand that, Sherrell. What's causing that? And is it something that can be fixed now that, maybe they've got a little bit of juice back in the tank?
I don't know. That's the simple answer. It's been a thing for years now. I don't quite understand it. It's like you always wish you could bottle the second half and give it to them, feed it to them before the game starts so they could play, in a similar style. I really don't have an answer. I know that's not good podcasting or good radio. I thought that wouldn't be as much of an issue considering some of the players that they had, this season. Vesar is more fiery than I guess we thought in the offseason. We know Wilson can be fiery depending upon when he's playing. Trimble can be fiery. So I just thought, with those 3 guys, a senior leader, you thought that maybe they would just get off to better starts than they had in the past, and it's not happening consistently. And I don't understand it. We can take guesses. We can talk about it. Is it the scouting report isn't getting to the floor quick enough during games, or is it that teams are doing something that UNC isn't expecting, so it takes them some time to adjust? Which, if that is the case, then you have to give them credit for halftime adjustments, which I think a lot of people say that this staff doesn't do well, but it's pretty clear that they do something at halftime, whether it's just pointing out, small little details. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but it is a trend. I mean, and it's been that way all the way back to the Kansas game, where they were down 10 with about 3
Mhm.
minutes left in the first half, and I think Wilson hits a 2, and then they come out within 3 minutes, and it's a tie game.
Mhm.
Same thing against Cal. It took a little bit longer, but they were down 17-18 in the first half, get it down to about 3. This game, down 16 in the first half. Within the first 5 minutes, I think they had the lead back by about the 12-minute mark. So I don't know, man. It's just something that they can't do consistently, though, because you're not going to be able to come back all the time. And we said that last year when they were doing it, when they got down by 20 against Duke and some of those other games, the Florida game, another example. But we'll see what happens. I don't have an answer, is the honest answer to your question.
That's all right. That's one of the things I've learned about this team is the more you feel like you've got a read on them, the less you know about them. And they've doubled down on that this past week. Something I think that is really clutch to talk about this Virginia game. And you could take 1,000 different ways to go. You could talk about how well they took care of the ball. You could talk about how they got blitzed on the glass and still found a way to win. You could talk about guys picking up the slack for Henry Vasar being out, or just Vasar just not having a great game. There's so many different ways you can talk about personnel. Stevenson, Dixon, Jonathan Powell getting 7 rebounds. There's so much to look at from that UVA game. I don't want to overhype it, but Sherrell, is there a way that can you overstate that game at this point in the season, knowing what this team just went through?
No, because again, no one thought they were going to win that game. Sean didn't. I'm speaking for Sean. Joey didn't. I didn't. Probably, some managers on the team didn't. A couple of players didn't. And the fact that they were down 16 again, and came back to win, just it says a lot. And it's one of those things where if they do have some success later on in the season, you look back to this and say, oh, that might have been the turning point. Like me and Joy on that podcast, I'll never forget. 2022, they lose to Pitt at home. We say it's over. They're never going to do anything. They're terrible. And they win like 12 of the next 13, beat Coach K at home, make it to the national championship game. So you just never know when inflection points are going to happen. But yeah, there was no reason to think that Carolina was going to go in there and win on Saturday. So again, we've crushed them on here. We've been, I think it's been applicable. It's been not unfair, what we said about the team, but now that they've put up 2 good performances to kind of help cancel out that West Coast trip, you have to give them credit, because when you lose 2 and you think you probably should win one of them, you got to pick up one that you were supposed to lose, and they were supposed to lose at UVA. So now they have a week off, and maybe that momentum will carry over, into Georgia Tech and the rest of the season.
Consider me also as one of these guys that I wish they were playing again immediately. I know that there's some schools of thought out there that will say, oh, well, you want to be able to sit with your confidence being very high after this, and you want to get back on the court after a loss.
Joey, in the comments, Garrett Clemens Sports, I see what you said. Honest to God, you thought that Carolina was going to go to UVA after the way they played and win yesterday. If so, major props to you. But I don't know what evidence there was to say.
Let me see your DraftKings account, Garrett Clemens.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I just don't know what evidence there was to make, folks think that was going to happen.
I don't have any evidence for you, but Friday night I was trying to log on to my account to place a money line bet. I couldn't get onto the account, and then Saturday
nobody believes you.
I know.
Nobody believes you. Well, but it also,
the only reason, like UVA, as well as they're playing, as well as their coach, they're still, and as big as their wins were, from an individual standpoint, they are still, a lot of mid-major players that are playing, above their skis to a certain extent. And I think I texted Sherrell, hey, this UVA team and their transfers, they're the ones that have hit that 16 parlay that Sherrell's always been talking about. And they did the first half, but like a lot of UVA teams in the past, this team has a ceiling to it in terms of what it can do. And, I think it played the perfect first half, but this isn't, we're not talking a top 10 team here. I think they're at their max point as well. But all that said, yes, it's still a huge win that most people did not expect.
So stay here, Sean. I think, North Carolina was hanging on by a thread in the first half. They were treading water at best. They had that little 7-point flurry. Maybe it was a 7-point flurry towards the end of the first half. And UVA, who had been scorching, all of a sudden comes out in the second half, and they're colder than a witch's boobs in a brass bra. And North Carolina had something to do with that, because they were much more connected defensively. They were a lot better at limiting UVA to one and done. They didn't have as many offensive rebounds as they had in the first half. But Sean, what did you see strategically in the second half that obviously was a change made at the break that made things different for North Carolina and allowed them to tilt the momentum?
Well, I think initially they were not surprised, but the physicality and the aggressiveness got to them, both offensively and defensively. And I think the fact that they were able, and even at the beginning, just a quick 5 points, not to get blown out at the beginning from Trimble, Steele to Bogovats. Same thing, that the big run at the second half. Defensively, I thought they knew what UVA was trying to do, and they just made it a little bit more uncomfortable for, they still hit a lot of shots, but Grunlow down low, now all of a sudden he's slightly off, and they're not getting that defense, so everything was just a little bit tougher or a little bit more contested, which at some point they were going to miss shots. And if they're not getting those rebounds, and UNC was able to take advantage of that in transition. But I think when you do see it, whether they were switching it seemed the 1 through 3, they were fine switching. But when they were doing that, there was great communication, and each person knew where the other player was going to be. I think in the past, one person might be ready to switch, the other person was not. There wasn't that connection. This time, the guards were talking to each other, and then the bigs were dropping pretty substantially, and there were times where they got almost boxed out by the other center for layups. But the game plan was there in terms of everybody needs to fight through the screen and try and take some accountability for your own defense, which we've talked about. And I think they did that, as well as having that connection point. So I don't know if they changed something strategically. It just seemed they were a little more locked in. They were more aggressive getting through. Things were a little tougher, but at the same time, UVA did start to miss shots. If Chance Mallory had hit that pull-up 3, what would, instead of the air ball, what would have happened? So there's always situations and plays in games you can point to where it could have, I think, swung or changed things, but they were missing. They did start to come back to earth, and at the end of the day, this was a team that was taking 53% of their shots from three-point line in ACC play, and UNC outscored them from 3 versus what we saw against Stanford and Cal of getting blitzed by the 3. And when you're down 10 threes, it's just too many points to give up sometimes.
We bagged on Hubert Davis and the staff, rightfully so, after they just got shot out of the gym twice from 3 against, actually 3 times if you want to count SMU. But I saw in the very first part of the Notre Dame game, I saw North Carolina get skinny on a high screen. It's the first time I had noticed that in a while. And then, like you said, Sean, I think they were much more physical getting through screens at UVA and getting better about that. Do you feel like that's something that maybe guys are understanding? And do you feel like it's something that eventually they can just do and replicate and make it become a thing that they don't have to be told every single time out or every single time they go in a game? Do you feel like that's something that maybe they can build off of?
I certainly hope so, and I hope that becomes the norm. I think, once again, this one I did feel they were very well prepared for, and I think that was shown in one of the baseline out of bounds where Vasar's guarding the inbounder and the man throwing the ball in bounds. He gets put on the perimeter against a guard, but they know a screen's coming. So he, after two screens, he gets matched up with the big man again. And I think a lot of times we see that, and it results in a mismatch or a breakdown pretty quickly. But I do think they understood, and UVA does a great job of putting a lot of people in motion and putting the pressure so that they can have those kickouts for those 3-pointers. But I think it's not something that, yes, shot making is going to come and go, but what they did defensively in terms of just the effort to get through things, as well as talking, those should be the bare minimums that they're doing going forward. And I think last week we talked about the non-negotiables. What are those for the team? And that's what that should be on the defensive end. If people are hitting crazy step backs or getting hot, sometimes there's not much you can do. But if you're getting through and playing tough man-to-man defense, which going back 2 years, I think Cormac Ryan was, the spear of that defensive team, and he was going to run through any screen that was set his way. And I think that's just what this team needs to keep doing going forward.
So Sherrell, in a game like that, where you have, one of your all-conference players in Vasar struggling, it's the first time he had struggled mightily and just, looked like something was bothering him. North Carolina is able to overcome because another guy shows up. And this time it was Jaron Stevenson. You saw Derek Dixon become who I think is now the starting point guard. I had said earlier this season I'd wished the coaching staff would just give the keys to a guy and let him figure it out, being Evans or Dixon or whomever. And it looks like Dixon has taken control over that. Uh, when you have that sort of change in lineups and other guys showing up and other guys um, filling in the gaps and picking up the slack and whatever other adage you want to use there, what does that mean for the other guys, right? So if you have been one of those other guys and you're stepping up, what does that mean for the guys that maybe lost minutes? Or um, is that something that the other guys are able to sustain in the future? Because we all knew Jaron Stevenson had that sort of ability. We just hadn't seen him do it at North Carolina. So you help me understand, what does it mean for the entire rotation when other guys are able to step up and fill the gaps?
I mean, it's great. Like we talked about earlier, it's confidence for the entire team that if Vasar is having a rough night, I don't know if they've been able to withstand a Caleb Wilson rough night yet, because it really hasn't happened the way we expected. But you've seen pretty much this season where if one of the regulars outside of Caleb Wilson isn't having their best game, then someone's been able to step up, and that gives the coaching staff, I would say, a ton of confidence in um, knowing they can go to Jonathan Powell for major minutes, or knowing they can go to a Jaden Young for major minutes. I mean, Jaden Young, I don't want to say he's the reason they won a couple of games, but he was up there because he gave them offense at a time that maybe another guard didn't. And then Jonathan Powell, to me, it's very funny how the game went. I think Jaron Stevenson ended up with what, 17 points, 15 points. Let me look it up.
17. He had none in the first half.
Yeah, so
he had in like 13 minutes of game time. He had 17 points.
So tell me, what would you expect normally from Henry Vasar this season? You'd expect about 16 and 10, right?
16 and 8, 16 and 10. That's what he had been. Yeah.
Right. So Stevenson had 17 points. Jonathan Powell had 7 rebounds, and Stevenson had 1 rebound. So
literally Vasar's stats.
So between those two, they made up the stats of Vasar. And to me, that is huge. Like you said, confidence going forward, coaching staff, team, to know that they're going to be able to, withstand if Vasar gets a 4th foul, or if Caleb Wilson, tweaks an ankle, Lord forbid, or, whatever it may be. That's huge. And I think for the players who maybe are losing minutes, I mean, they're all competitors. They all are at Carolina for a reason. So if I see that I'm getting passed in the rotation, what do you think that's going to make me do? It's going to make me study a little harder. It's going to make me maybe get up some more shots. It's going to make me want to run some more, lift some more weights. And again, that kind of stuff is infectious once it starts happening. So I guess the hope from the Carolina staff is you continue to get what you got. Oh, let's put it this way. Jaron Stevenson is very unlikely to have 17 points and a half again this season. So let's just be clear about that. Like, I don't want that to become the expectation that he's just going to become a microwave scorer off the bench, because that's still not quite like his game. But he's capable of doing it just in case, and the other teams will know that too. So I think if you're one of the other guys, you're just like, hey man, I've got to find a way into the lineup. Sean has talked about anchor skills so many times. So what is it for the guys who maybe aren't getting as much playing time as they want? What is it that I can do, that they can do, to anchor themselves to playing time? And whether it's just go out there and play good defense for 5 minutes, whether it's like, if I get an open shot, I have to knock it down, whatever it is, like, try to perfect that. So when your number is called, the team will have confidence in you to deliver. And so that in the future, you'll get more minutes. So to me, that's really what it is. It's about the entire roster kind of coming together and understanding that, they can fill those gaps when needed.
You putting any extra stock or extra value into the fact that they won a meaningful game on the road against a tough opponent?
Oh, yeah, for sure. But again, it's great. I don't want to sound like I'm downplaying it, but I don't understand why it takes getting down 16 for this sense of urgency to pop in to kick in. That's something that I just can't reconcile, because they knew how important this game was. Like, they knew what would happen if they lost. They knew it was a Q1 opportunity. They knew they blew 2 Q1 opportunities last week. So why come out so, I don't say lethargic, but without the attention to detail, like we're talking about, without that fire? It almost, you would expect
mad effort, very mid.
Yeah, you would expect it to be the opposite. You would expect them to come out, at 100 RPM, and then kind of slow down in the second half because they've given everything they have. So I don't know. They've got to figure that out though, because it's coming back from 25 and 16 and 12 and 10. It's not going to happen consistently moving forward.
So something that has been consistent. Caleb Wilson. I can't get over the moxie, and every time you feel like you understand what a unicorn he is, every time you feel like you understand, all right, what he's capable of, he shows you something else. He absolutely pulls something else out of his bag and puts it on display. And it always seems like it's at a time where North Carolina really, really needs it. You could talk about, him getting offensive rebounds during the game against UVA. You could talk about them going to him after, the Cavaliers had cut it to 2 in the last minute of the game. You could talk about his defense being a little improved after he recognized that he was not rotating well and he was not doing well off the ball. I mean, he still has some times where he gets caught watching. But either way, Caleb Wilson is so much more than advertised. And this is going to be, I guess, our Caleb Wilson segment brought to you by Alex Swire-Clark. Alex Swire-Clark is absolutely a big-time rock star within the world of speaking. He's also a multi-time published author. He's won all kinds of awards. I want you guys, if you're in a position to need a speaker or need someone to come in and motivate your team or to help kind of break up some log jams in communication amongst your team, if you've got, intra-office communication problems and you really just think you guys aren't performing the way you need to perform, Alex can fix that. He's spoken to small groups, large groups, massive ballrooms full of people to help them understand how they can be better and perform higher by delivering an unforgettable experience that helps hundreds of organizations increase their self-awareness, their efficiency, and reduce conflict. And in this year, 2026, all of those things will help your business. If you're running a civic club, maybe you're chair of the Rotary or what have you, you need a speaker. Call Alex. Have him come in and talk to your group. I promise it's going to make for a great topic. It's going to make for a great session. It's going to make for an awesome convening of the minds. And everybody that you have will walk out of there feeling really good about what they just heard. Alex is a UNC graduate, a longtime IC lurker. You can visit his website at alexswire-clark.com. alexswire-clark.com. He is the gentleman that provides us this Caleb Wilson segment. And man, it's always something to talk about with Caleb. So let's dig into that. He's the catalyst in both wins. He's efficient in his scoring, his playmaking. He's gotten a lot more physical. He's starting to talk. He spoke a little bit after the Notre Dame game and saying how he had started to speak up and use his voice a little more. Sean, I want you to talk a little bit about what's different in Wilson's what he's added in UNC's attack that maybe we weren't seeing prior to Christmas.
Well, maybe just going back a second to what you were talking about in terms of being more vocal. I think I was pretty harsh on him last week just from that defensive effort. And I feel not just him, but him and other players at times have gotten excited, but it's usually been about something they have done. And for Wilson, I definitely can get the frustration where you're expending so much energy and you're throwing a bullet point pass and you're playing at a 10 level and everybody outside of Vasar isn't able to get really close to that level. So definitely understand the frustration. But I think in that Notre Dame game, you saw a lot of excitement on the bench, which I don't think I'd seen all season. Once again, TV, you can't see everything. So not saying it wasn't there, but you saw the excitement on the bench. You saw the excitement, the hockey pass going into a timeout's call because you just made a shot and going to kind of gather with your teammates versus walking towards the bench. So there were some things that I saw in both games. Just it seemed like he was making more of an effort from that vocal perspective to do it in a team setting and to start galvanizing the players around him, given his, everything he does bring on the court. So that's something I would love to see going forward from him, or a continuation of that just trying to uplift everybody to get to his level. But and then the other thing, which I think goes a little unsaid, there were 2 times where he picked the pocket of one of the players. In the second half, first half led to he turned it over, but second half on Day Ritter, I still don't know how he got, I don't know how he tapped it and then got the run out. But those were huge plays and shows his defensive potential. But in terms of just what he's been doing after Christmas, I mean, I think it's what we saw this past week was going to take what the defense gives, but I'm going to be able to attack quickly. And when he had the up and under against Oniensu, I mean that was a great move. He was rifling passes. He wasn't forcing the issue, but he had a really probably one of the toughest matchups he's had in terms of a talent. The opposing four being really talented, and he didn't shy from it. And he was prepared defensively to try to front the post initially. Offensively, he was being aggressive, even though it was a little bit harder on the boards to do so. And he didn't take things out of context, which I think has been the main thing overall. But to me, outside of what he did offensively, was just more that connection and trying to uplift the teammates. But I did love him getting out in transition even more so than we've seen, and hopefully that can continue from that 4 spot.
Yeah, it's crazy. Even when he was out yesterday, it's almost like he raised his level and then went to the bench, and the team maintained it. And I think Stevenson was part of that, but also I think the rest of the team is starting to realize that they've got to be able to match his energy if they want to be who they aspire to be. Sherrell, what does it mean for the rest of the guys, and what does it mean for some older guys, like a Stevenson, like a Seth Trimble, when they see a young player as young as Caleb Wilson is come in there and really just every single play he's out there, at least offensively, you feel like he's so dialed in and he's so just 100% all out all the time. Again, he gets lost a little bit on defense sometimes, but what does it mean for those guys when you've got a freshman that's just so much of a contributor to what North Carolina wants to do?
Let me first answer in the chat. Sorry, 100 RPM is not very fast, evidently. So how about 9,000 RPM to go back to that? All
That's
right,
that's red,
so
that's redlining most cars, bro. Yeah.
there you go.
Okay.
I should have said 100 miles per hour. I said RPM. I apologize for that mistake. I will make sure that it doesn't happen again. It's huge when you have a superstar talent on your team, right? Because I mean, he's kind of your moneymaker. Like when things are down, or you need a basket or someone who can kind of take over, you have that person. And so it's always nice to have that kind of in your back pocket. You don't always want to call on that or use that. You want to save that for when you really need it. But the fact that it's there again provides confidence, I think, to the team. And then they respect him. I would say as a player and a leader, because again, we've said this many times. Sean said it. Joey said it. He has more to lose than anyone else out there. So when you see him doing some of the things that the coaching staff is asking for, you see him, making the unselfish play, you see him trying to play hard consistently, then that makes it easier for you to do it too. Because again, he has more to lose. He's got draft people talking to him. He's got multi-million-dollar deals, et cetera, et cetera. So it's to me, it's always a positive when kind of your best player has that mentality that he wants to, go hard all the time. And I think some of the deficiencies that we're seeing, some of the sagging off of defenders and not making, pretty quick closeouts. I think some of that stuff is still him getting used to playing college basketball. It's a combination of that and fatigue, and also just the weight that he carries overall for making the team kind of go. So it's yes, you would like to see him sprint out on closeouts every single time, but I just don't know how realistic it is considering everything that he does for the team. And maybe people don't like that, but I do think that is something to consider because he does have more weight on him from a scoring standpoint, from a rebounding standpoint, even a defensive standpoint, pushing the ball, getting steals, blocking shots. He just got a ton of stuff going on. And so if that means a closeout here or a closeout there is a fraction of a second slower, I think you have to live with that considering everything else he does. So I took it away from your original question, but I think it is a big deal to have someone like him because you know that in the end he's going to be able to get you a bucket if you need it. You don't want to rely on it, but if you need it, it's there.
And I love what Hubert Davis said after the game, actually. They asked him about drawing up that play for Wilson, and he said he just wanted to get Wilson the ball in space, which I think is a really good answer because there's not a lot of people in the country that can stop Caleb Wilson one-on-one if he decides he's going to the cup. He's that talented. He's that athletic. He's that gifted. So I think it's just North Carolina fans, and we've said it 100 times on the show if we've said it once, enjoy him while he's here. He is one of one. And he's just so fun to watch. Talking a little bit more about some of the rotations and some of the role players that we mentioned earlier. We mentioned Stevenson's second half. We talked about Dixon's usage of the pitch ahead, which I think that gives this team an entirely different layer. If you've got a point guard that's willing to look ahead, especially with with a 4-man or a 3-man streaking down the center of the court, that really changes what this team's able to do from a points per possession standpoint. Sean, with these guys like Bogovats, who is now quietly finding his stroke and finding ways to contribute on a regular basis, do you feel like Hubert Davis's rotation and the deployment of these minutes is this sustainable for the ACC stretch? Because we're at the end of January. There's only 6 weeks left of games, and he's still using 10 guys. How sustainable is this rotation, Sean?
Well, it all depends on the consistency of what those guards can produce. I think what we saw from Luka this past week, a lot of what we've talked about coming in was, hey, there's a lot of individual people that should be good shooters that are all shooting well below what was expected or they've done in the past. And Luka was one of those guys. And I think he's probably been one of Luka, Caleb, and Seth, I think, have all done things selfishly at times offensively, whether it's on fast breaks or taking contested shots. But that was something you rarely saw this week. Against Notre Dame, I think Luka did it maybe once or twice in the second half, but he was taking shots in the rhythm of the half court set, getting out in transition. I thought he had some big shots in the first half just to kind of keep them in the game, and as well as that one at the end of the first half. But if he can, when he goes straight up and straight down, so I think between him and Stevenson, hopefully they can keep this confidence, because basketball is such a game of confidence, especially in college, that if he can turn into that dependable, once again, you don't need 20 points from him, but if you can get that 8 to 13 points consistently with 1 or 2 threes, that makes a world of difference for this team that, as we said, has struggled to score, struggled to get baskets at times. So if you have a consistent score, and yeah, I'm sure they would like to get down to that 7 or 8 man rotation, but they were starting Jaden Young this week because he played so well, and he was one of the few wings that did play hard and well in California. So I still think it's going to be who's playing well in the first half, and then how does that transition into the second half in terms of that long run. But ideally, guys like Luka and Jaren, who have started at different points, that they can showcase that consistency, which just uplifts the potential for this team.
So a question I had for y'all, and I think it ties into this well, is like, we all go back to, I guess, Adam Lucas coined it the Iron Five back in Hubert's first year. And I think that was as much a necessity as it was that's who was playing the best at the time. With this group, like Joey said, there's 10 guys who are getting playing time. Do you try to cut it down to what Sean said, 6.5, maybe even, like seven guys every game, and deal with some of the fatigue issues and deal with maybe closeouts that are a little slower or fighting through screens not quite as tough because there's those extra minutes there? Or do you risk playing more guys knowing that they might not have played their best this season, knowing that they're not as talented? Like, I guess, how do you guys fall on those two sides?
Let Joey go first.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think as long as the 10 guys that are getting rotational minutes right now are still engaged, I think you still use them. One of the things that we've seen is over however many years, there's always been a wall for freshmen. And right now, North Carolina is not only playing Caleb Wilson a ton of minutes, but they've been playing Henry Vasar a ton of minutes. I know he's not a freshman, but he's never had this much usage as what he's going through at North Carolina right now. And I'm thinking that's probably what contributed to that and the size difference at UVA as to why he had such a rough game. I would just say I think you keep using those guys until they make themselves unplayable.
Yeah, which I mean, I know we're talking about 10 guys. I don't know how realistic the high minutes are going to be depending on what that looks like, and does Stevenson slide into that 4 or 5 and it's just used a little more aggressively, especially seeing some of those runouts or some of the things he did, or does he go to that 3? I think Luke is going to be there consistently. Young could be a guy that phases out, but once again, if he's playing hard and making things happen, then I think he'll continue to get some minutes. And then Kyan Evans, right, the guy that was supposed to be doing a lot more. I still think at the end of the day, he's going to get bench minutes and see if he is able to hit 1 to 2 threes, but he's going to be given those opportunities just to spell Dixon and provide some rest. So I think it could get cut down to 8. But I think with the guards and the wings, once again, that lack of consistency that you're always going to be needing to play that 8 to 9 man rotation. It just comes down to the bigs. Do they just keep, cut High's minutes, or does he go in very strategically if Stevenson's at the 3 or there's foul trouble, etc.?
2 follow-ups, and then I'll let Joey have his show back. One is, has anyone reached that point, Joey, to what you said, to the point where they might be unplayable, or proven that they might be unplayable? And then 2, I guess for you, Sean, is it a situation where you should just ride with, pick whoever does the best in practice? I think that's the reason Jaden Young has, started the last couple of games, because he was rewarded for his practice performance and his performance in a couple of games. But do you just pick, 7 or 8 guys and say, you know what, these are my guys, I'm riding with these guys no matter what, no matter the matchup, this is what I'm going to do? Or would you like to see more of a hit or miss approach depending upon matchups and all that stuff?
I don't think there's anybody that's unplayable at this point. I mean, I love the Zayden High experience because every time he comes in, he's in his head, he's got the greenest light there is. But until he gets to a place where he's actively hurting the team, and he looked that way a little bit in November, I think he still plays. And I think the other guys that are, your 7, 8, 9 are giving something to the squad. I think Kyan Evans is really struggling right now. He had a chance against UVA that if he hits a 3, it absolutely could have been a backbreaker. He was clean. It was free throw line extended, and nobody was anywhere close to closing out on him. And he just, front rimmed it. It was bad. So I don't think anybody's played themselves into that spot that they're unplayable yet. But I think there might be some matchup situations later where you absolutely can't go to this guy or that guy.
Yeah, and I think if Luka were to continue to step up and play well, perhaps that, in my mind, I could see a revolving door at that. Who's that 5th starter, as well as who are those bench pieces? Once again, knowing how Hubert likes to see what happens in that first half. So I don't know if we get that consistent lineup, starters, bench players, game after game. But the teams are also so drastically different that I like having the flexibility to match up differently or provide some size. Or if, once again, things are going great in that first half, especially the first 10 minutes where you're scoring 30 plus points, but how many 10 minutes have we seen them struggle a lot? And you need, unfortunately, with this team, you do need to try to fit the pieces together as it's happening. And I think, unfortunately, that will continue to be a theme at certain times of the season, just given some of the challenges offensively that we have seen.
All right. Let's take a couple of questions from our audience. We've got almost 400 folks here with us live on a Sunday night. Again, I hope you guys are all safe and warm. So somebody asked earlier, will Young start the rest of the year? If you got an answer for that, you've got a lot better line and a read on this staff than I do. Sherrell?
Yeah, I doubt it. I think, we talk about coaches sending messages and coaches trying to motivate and accountability. I think this maybe is the Hubert Davis version of that, in that he saw someone who plays hard, who doesn't necessarily have the high level skills that you would associate with a starter at UNC, but he was doing the things the coach asked him to do, and then has knocked down some shots and played some decent defense. So to me, that's almost like Hubert Davis saying like, "This is how I'm going to hold folks accountable by starting Jaden." Not necessarily by punishing others. It's in line with how Hubert Davis operates because it's very positive, as opposed
Mhm.
to talking about someone else. He's saying how good Jaden is doing. But I think there are others who will match that, or who have matched that, at doing what the coach asked them to do, playing hard, but who also are a little more talented and a little more able to help the team at this point. So I would say no, especially with a week off, to get ready for Georgia Tech. I think they'll tweak things and try to put their best five out there.
All right, next question from Butch Green in the chat. Are there any stats regarding injury prevention and minutes played? He references North Carolina's studying of concussions that they do a lot for football and other sports. Want to know, does North Carolina have anyone studying usage and injury correlation? It's a great question. I love that it's on the heels of what we said earlier about trying to maintain depth based on how much of a rotation Hubert Davis is using. Either one of you guys have any insight on that? Because I don't. Nope. Sean?
No insight, but I mean, look, I think you look at a team like Oklahoma City or some of the NBA teams and how they try to manage minutes. Granted, you're playing 82 games over the course versus 30 some and 2 games a week, but interesting question. And I think, at least off the top of my head, could point to some different case studies that you could talk to both sides of it working out or not working out. But yeah, interesting question.
My guess too, Joey, is that guys who maybe are taking a big step up, this is just completely guessing,
Yeah.
but I would think they might be more in line for injury, considering the higher toll on their body than maybe that they were used to in previous years.
Yeah, because fatigue causes injuries in any sport, and I think there's something really big to be said there. Not a specific question, but I've seen a couple of folks ask about, and I don't know why it is. Well, I know why it is, I guess. But with the struggles that North Carolina has seen at the guard position until Derek Dixon's recent resurgence, why isn't Isaiah Dennis getting more minutes? And I've seen people ask this on Twitter. I've seen people ask this on X, formerly known as Twitter. I've seen people ask this on the message boards. And we've had some folks ask in the chat tonight. Sherrell, why is it that Isaiah Dennis isn't getting minutes? I know the answer, but I think they'd probably rather hear from you.
I mean, I don't necessarily know the answer. I think my guess would be that the backup quarterback is always the most popular person on the team, and he's the only one who hasn't really been given a chance to show what he can do. And when he does get in the game, albeit in situations where Carolina was in blowouts, he looked good. But I think it has more to do with just that, Jonathan Powell, he's behind Jonathan Powell and Luka Bogovac and Seth Trimble to some degree. And he's not at the point, he's not in a situation where he's ready to play any kind of lead guard or be a primary initiator, offensively, in college. So it kind of leaves you like, well, where do the minutes come from? Now, granted, I think in some of those games where UNC might have a 9 or 10 point lead in the first half, it's happened before. Yeah, it'd be nice to get him a couple minutes in there, in those games. I think the Wake Forest game, which was, to me, was a little funny and ironic because in his recruitment, it came down to Wake Forest and Carolina. I'm pretty sure that was the only time in ACC play he played in the first half, and it was those final 2 minutes. So it's kind of like, was Hubert Davis being a little bit of a troll there, or is it just what happened in practice that week? I'm not sure, but yeah, I think that's why, because he's not ready to be a lead guard, and then he's got really 3 guys and 4 if you consider Jaden Young kind of ahead of him at that 2 spot.
Which it really quickly just shows like the crap shoot of recruiting rankings, where he's played well in EYBL for the most part and ranked in the 50s, and then you have Keaton Wagler at Illinois, who a 4-star 150, and he's scoring 46 points against a top ranked team. So you never know.
Yeah, or Joey, it could be a situation where the Carolina staff just doesn't really. I'm not being sarcastic at all. They just might not realize what they have, and it could be a situation where he's not doing what he's supposed to do in practice, and maybe it would come out better if he just got game minutes. I don't know. I really don't have the answer, but
Yeah.
there we've kind of seen that it's unlikely to happen moving forward because we're more than halfway through the season and he just hasn't gotten the ACC minutes at all.
Yeah, I feel like with the struggles that they've had at that position, if he was an answer, I feel like we would have seen him before now. And who knows if he starts getting some playing time, maybe that means he's doing the right things in practice, a la Jaden Young getting elevated to the starting rotation. All right, before we get out of here, I want to see if you guys have, I guess, a parting shot that you want to throw out there before we put a bow on this. And speaking of putting bows on things, think about gifts from Johnny T-shirt. Johnny T-shirt, longtime sponsor of Inside Carolina. You know you love them. You've heard us talk about them. Most of the folks listening to this show have been to Johnny T-shirt multiple times in their lives, and they can attest to the fact that what I'm saying is the truth. Make sure you go to the premium message boards, get the code, use it for an extra 10% off your order at Johnny T-shirt. Johnny T-shirt is right there on East Franklin Street in Chapel Hill, owned and operated by alumni. Great people. Want you to make sure that you see them very soon. Go in there, stock up. North Carolina will actually have some home games in February. Baseball's starting really soon. Those dudes are down to like, I think, 3 weeks maybe before they actually get out on the diamond. So go to Johnny T-shirt, make it happen. While you're thinking about your parting shot, Sherrell, you want to give a Dylan Mingo update?
He's going to commit to a school at some point. That is the update. Now, if you look at last week, we had an update with some quotes from Joe Tipton and some information we had. I do think it is getting closer. I know we said that for a couple of months, but I do think North Carolina is positioned pretty favorably. That doesn't mean he's going to UNC, but they definitely are in it, and we'll just see what happens when he announces.
All right. Y'all heard it here. And again, if there's any news there, make sure you're checking Inside Carolina on the daily. If there's something that shakes or breaks or quakes, we will have it for you. All right, Sean, give me a last shot. Give me your, a matter of fact, I'm going to phrase it a little bit differently so it's not just an open-ended question. What was the best thing that happened to this team this week?
The best thing, well, I would love to go too, but I know you'll kill me for that. So I will stay off of Dixon for the moment. But I think in general, playing with purpose, both offensively and defensively. Offensively, in that second half, whether it was something they saw with UVA to get the mismatches down low at that 4 spot, from which they were getting those from a height perspective between Stevenson and Wilson, but just having that off ball movement, really running. Wilson was setting screens with purpose where he would set an off-ball screen. Luka would do his Iverson cut around the court, and then he would come set a screen on the ball, head to the post. Vasar is coming back. He's popping. So there's movement and purpose, and everybody seemed like they knew what they were doing. So there wasn't a lot of thinking going on, which I think helped that just crispness, which we've always talked about from the summer. Same thing defensively, as we're talking of them. They were trying, for the most part, not to switch or to get through, but there was a purpose that they were playing with, which was definitely not there in the California game until the end. And it was there in Stanford. It was just they were all over the place in terms of what they're doing. So hopefully the team can continue to play with a purpose and, keep getting some easy baskets in transition, which we have not seen for the most part outside of Wilson in a while.
Thank you for keeping that to one. Sherrell, I want to ask you, what was the best thing that happened to this team this week?
Yeah, I'm going to steal from the chat and say that Derek Dixon kind of locked up starting guard role at UNC for as long as he wants to be at UNC. And, if it's the next 3 years, and I guess it's like the next 105, 110 games, he'll be a starter at UNC barring injury. I think that's the most important thing. I mean, the 2 games this week, 9 assists, 2 turnovers. He's been in double figures each of his 3 starts. They're 3-1 when he scores 10 points or more. He's got a 22% assist rate in conference play. He's shooting 39% from 3 in conference play. So he's really stepped it up, I would say, over the last 5, I guess over the 5 or 6 games since ACC play started. So the fact that he is really taking control of the lead guard spot and giving them, more than they were getting there is big for the team offensively. Still got some work to do defensively, but I think that'll come as he gets smarter, older, stronger, etc. But they've got a starting guard for as long as he has eligibility with the NCAA. Maybe that's gonna be 8 years moving forward. But he's really solidified himself as a starter. And uh, sorry, Joey, but someone asked about the starting lineup in the chat, and it's like before we would always say Trimble, Wilson, Vasar, and then figure it out based on matchups. And now I think you can say Dixon, Trimble, Vasar, Wilson, and then you figure it out based on matchup. So he has really elevated himself, and that's big for Carolina.
Absolutely. And man, I don't want to put these sorts of lofty expectations on the young man, but it was about the same time of the season when North Carolina went away from Larry Drew and went to Kendall Marshall, if my memory serves. Um, Again, just putting that out there in the ether. Draw conclusions from that as you wish. All right, y'all. Fellas, I appreciate you making time for this show. Hope that you continue to stay safe. Hope everybody can keep power. Hey, want to thank all of the utility crews that are out there trying to keep everything up and running for us so we can do stuff like this show. If you know somebody that's a lineman for the county, give them a shout out. Tell them we appreciate them doing all the hard work in all these dangerous conditions. And anybody that's out there doing the frontline stuff right now to keep us all safe when weather is having its way with us. We just know that the Coast to Coast crew appreciate you. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Appreciate everybody in the chat for making us a part of their evening. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review us as well. If you're in the YouTube chat tonight, like us, subscribe, all that good stuff. You know all what to do, and I'll stop trying to tell you about it. But until next time, for Sean Moran and for Sherrell McMillan, for Inside Carolina, I'm Joey Powell. Y'all make it a great week. We'll talk to you soon.